Welcome, I'm Marcus White and this is Everyone is God. I have always wanted to lead people, and although it may be extremely stressful leading the country at this time, I cannot help but want to be the Prime Minister right now. I believe that good leadership means being honest about what we are, both our weaknesses and our strengths, being equal to and as human as those that you lead, and being honest about the truth of the world. I feel fear at what coronavirus will mean for us, but also hope that it will change world consciousness and bring people together. We may have the idea that we have to choose between our economy or saving lives in this time of COVID-19. But in this video, I want to look at if this is true or not. There has to be balance to protect the greater good in the short term and the longer term too. It seems to me that all healthcare systems around the world are funded by money. The money comes from taxes or private sources, such as healthcare insurance. And all of this money ultimately comes from business and the income people gain from it. Business is the only thing that makes money, and money is the only thing that funds healthcare, other than a very small amount of voluntary help. We must remember that a strong economy means more money for our health systems and public services. Strong economies mean strong national healthcare systems. Travelling all over the world has left me in no conceivable doubt about this. In India, for example, I have seen some of the hundreds of millions of people who have very little money and very little or no healthcare. Whereas in many rich countries, I see that most or all are treated in excellent hospitals. Can there be any doubt that strong economies mean strong healthcare systems? We face a worldwide health disaster that cannot realistically be stopped, only slowed. It seems that COVID may transmit to many of the world's population, becoming endemic. However, we do have much more control of our economies. We have choices about how we protect our economies and businesses. It does not serve anyone to allow a shorter-term health disaster to then create another much longer-term disaster, a worldwide financial recession or depression. What does humanity prefer? A world in which we have a health disaster, or one in which we have a health disaster followed by an economic disaster? Recession means less money for healthcare over many years to come. This means more loss of life in the long term through reduced healthcare resources. Recession means less money for mental care, social care and services, policing and charities. This means more suffering, poverty and crime. Recession means less wealth and the well-being that comes from it for all of us. Our well-being is important. The WHO states that close to 800,000 people die worldwide due to suicide every year. For each one of these, there can be more than 20 others attempting suicide. That is more than 16 million attempts. In this time of lockdown, domestic abuse has increased and people struggle with the limited lifestyle we have at the moment. It is not a wise policy to protect one person's life from corona if it is at the expense of another person's life or well-being. The government is focused on protecting us from one thing, coronavirus. In doing this, the greater picture of our health and well-being is neglected. And this could mean suffering and death in the short and longer term. For example, we may see more short-term and medium-term death from suicide, alcohol and drug abuse, and domestic violence. On the 9th of March 2020, the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development says, downside scenario sees a $2 trillion shortfall in global income. The UN calls for coordinated policy making to prevent a global economic meltdown. More recently, the Asian Development Bank says the cost of coronavirus pandemic could be as high as $4.1 trillion, or almost 5% of the global gross domestic product. This could be enough to put us into worldwide depression. COVID-19 causes suffering and death. Recession or depression can cause suffering and death for longer and possibly on a greater scale. If we add up all the health effects of recession, we may find this could be more than the effects of the virus itself. I want to take you now to my business park to show you what is happening to the businesses there. So this is Eden Park, an ecological business park that I designed and built about 8 years ago. It's a fully timber frame, timber constructed building, and as you see, I'm going to take you around to the car park on the side here, and you'll see that it's also clad in cedar. So it's a fully timber built construction. So we're at the west side of the building now, and I'm just showing the car parking area here, and I've actually been around the site and counted, and there's about 10 cars here today. Normally we'd expect up to about 40 cars, so we're running at about 25% of the people that would normally be here at this business park. And there's actually 3 businesses on site here, so I know that all of them are running at a very low level of staff. We must not allow fear or panic to force us into policies which only consider the next few weeks or months, but may then shock the world economy into recession or depression. We must make balanced policy decisions which consider the short-term suffering, death of the virus, along with the longer-term poverty, suffering and death caused by recession or depression. We may have less control over the virus, but we have far more over how we run our economies. We should use this power wisely with the whole picture in mind, so that the total amount of suffering and death over the coming months and years is minimized. We must remember that it is not money or life, it is money and life. They go together and cannot be separated. There is no fundamental conflict of interest between money and life. The economy and healthcare are 2 parts of one system, parts that we need to work together in harmony with each other if we want a fully functioning society. I believe we must monitor the virus spread and test extensively, quarantine those who are affected, and limit all unnecessary social contact to reduce suffering and death over the coming months. I also believe we must keep our businesses and world economies functioning adequately to reduce suffering, poverty and death over the longer term future too. I largely agree with the government and believe they are doing their best. However, businesses are not trading as usual. This is for a number of reasons. Because businesses are not confident to trade at the moment. They have people self-isolating when they don't know if they have the COVID virus or not. Confidence is affecting supply chains and orders, and business owners struggle to meet the 2-meter rule. The net result is that it becomes difficult or impossible to trade normally, and business owners can find it easier to furlough some or all of their staff. The working population is generally under 65 years old and as such at lower risk from COVID-19. My view is that the government should send a revised message to the businesses currently allowed to trade. Business must trade as normally as possible to fund our health services, public services and future well-being. I believe we should consider relaxing the 2-meter rule inside these businesses to a guideline rather than a hard rule, and back this up with rapid testing of staff with symptoms to get those who are free from the virus back to work, just as we need to test NH staff to get them back to work too. As governments and individuals, we face great uncertainty and extremely difficult decisions. Is there a single person on the planet who knows exactly what to do right now for sure? All we can do is our best. However, there is one thing I do feel sure on. We must recognise that economies fund healthcare and overall well-being in all of life, at all times. There is no time or circumstance which can ever avoid this truth. My government says, stay at home, protect the NHS, save lives. I believe we should say, stay at home, protect businesses to fund the NHS, save lives and suffering. I hope this video is of help to you. Please do share or subscribe if you found it interesting. Love and light to you. Namaste.